China warning it is not afraid of a trade war with the U.S. after President Trump announced plans to impose 100% tariffs on Chinese imports and new export controls on critical software. However, the president also then softened his tone over the weekend, saying everything with China will be fine.
Canada's foreign affairs minister will travel to China in a matter of weeks in a move that could signal an easing of tensions between the two countries, locked in a diplomatic standoff.
A handshake with the second most powerful man in China, Premier Li Qiang.
Those discussions will deepen. I will expect at the appropriate time to be meeting with President Xi Jinping.
In a move that stunned the world, Canada has done the unthinkable. For generations, it stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States, tied by trust, trade, and shared ideals. But that bond has now been rattled. In an astonishing shift, Canada openly pivoted away from Washington, aligning itself with China. The decision sent ripples of shock through global capitals, leaving even veteran diplomats at a loss for words. What could push such a steadfast U.S. partner to embrace its greatest rival? And what does this mean for North America's alliances and the global balance of power? Let's unpack it. It started with a jolt no one saw coming. When the Trump administration slapped a blanket 100% tariff on Canadian goods, everything from steel and aluminum to vehicles and timber, Ottawa was blindsided. The U.S. wasn't just a trading partner. It was Canada's closest ally, its biggest market, and the bedrock of its economy. But Washington's message was unmistakable. America first, no compromises. Faced with this, Canada had to choose: submit to U.S. economic pressure or forge a daring path toward independence. That choice was made in secrecy, with a level of discretion rarely seen in Canadian diplomacy. Days after the tariffs were enacted, a small Canadian delegation quietly boarded a government jet bound for Beijing. Officially, the trip was about energy cooperation. In reality, it marked the start of a seismic shift that would reshape political and economic lines across the Northern Hemisphere. Reports later revealed China's offer was too compelling to dismiss. A sweeping strategic partnership, including long-term purchases of Canadian gas, uranium, and agricultural goods, paired with massive investments in infrastructure and energy projects. In exchange, Canada would gain full access to Asian markets, a lifeline to offset the pain of U.S. tariffs. For Prime Minister Mark Carney, long a balancer between global superpowers, this was the moment of truth. In a televised address to the nation, Carney spoke of safeguarding Canadian livelihoods and asserting national sovereignty, earning roaring applause in Parliament. Washington's response was swift and furious. Within hours, Donald Trump took to social media, accusing Canada of exploiting the U.S. and vowing repercussions. But for the first time in modern history, Canada stood firm, no longer content to play the role of America's junior partner, but instead carving its own path as an independent power. Global observers quickly recognized the enormity of this shift. Economists called it economic separatism, while the Financial Times dubbed it a quiet northern revolution. The boldest moment came when Canada's foreign minister declared Ottawa's support for China's countermeasures against U.S. tariffs, a diplomatic bombshell. Behind this move was a calculated strategy. China, seeking reliable partners to secure vital resources amid rising tensions with the U.S., found a perfect match in Canada, with its vast reserves of oil, gas, uranium, nickel, and rare earth elements. In return, Beijing offered investments in Canadian infrastructure, new Pacific ports, and low-interest credit through the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. In Washington, the reaction was one of disbelief. U.S. officials, caught off guard, scrambled to reconnect, but their calls went unanswered. As one senior source told the Wall Street Journal, American diplomats felt blindsided. Another official admitted, "We always saw Canada as an extension of us. Now it feels like they're gone." For Trump, the fallout was personal. He had often professed affection for Canada during his presidency while grumbling about trade imbalances. Now, his policies had achieved what no foreign rival could, pushing America's closest neighbor into China's orbit. Markets reacted instantly. The Canadian dollar soared, Chinese stocks climbed, and U.S. markets dipped amid fears of a fractured North American trade system. Canadian corporations wasted no time adapting. Energy giants like Suncor and Barrick Gold began talks with Chinese partners for joint ventures, turning a geopolitical shift into tangible action. In Washington, outrage grew. Senator Marco Rubio branded Canada's move a continental betrayal, while Steve Bannon warned that Trump had unleashed forces beyond his control. Fox News accused Carney of selling out to Beijing, and pundits spoke of a new economic Cold War. Yet in Canada, the mood was one of resolve. Analysts framed the decision as self-preservation, not betrayal. As University of Calgary economist James Brown put it, Canada was done having its fate dictated by U.S. policy swings. This isn't disloyalty, he said. It's maturity. In China, the move was hailed as a diplomatic triumph. The Global Times crowed that America's attempt to isolate China had backfired, isolating the U.S. instead. On Chinese social media, Northern Partner became a viral sensation, racking up millions of views. To many in China, Canada's pivot signaled a global realignment, evidence that U.S. dominance was no longer ironclad. The ripple effects extended beyond trade. Within NATO, unease spread rapidly. Though Canada remained a member, European officials questioned its reliability, with Brussels reportedly debating whether to limit Canada's access to sensitive NATO data, fearing leaks to Beijing through its new ties. Still, financial circles saw opportunity. The Financial Post cast Canada as a bridge between East and West. But beneath the optimism lay a stark reality. The U.S. had long relied on Canadian oil, gas, and minerals. If those resources now flowed to Asia, North America's power balance would shift dramatically.